Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be talking about one of the many trolls that frequent the comment section of the Atheist Experience YouTube channel. He is known by many names, but in this video we'll call him Sparty. He uses a couple of accounts that we know of. One is Rick Lambert 963 and the other is Spartan 9637. He said in the comments that he's 60 years old, and I believe him, because he's obviously not savvy enough to not use parts of his birth date in his handle, despite my advice to him to change it. That's not to say all 60-year-olds don't have this level of common sense. I'm just saying that he doesn't. Now, he also claims that he's a retired mechanical engineer. This is no different than someone claiming to be a retired millionaire medical doctor when they are in fact living in a mobile home after coming out of prison. But we'll get back to Sparty's claim that he was a mechanical engineer, since someone with that type of education should be pretty well versed in practical physics and math. So before that, just some background. Sparty likes to call everyone he disagrees with bots. And the reason why he thinks half the commenters on the channel are bots is because of some report that he read, and he posts this in his spam, where it says half the internet traffic are bot traffic. Now, of course, that report is about all internet traffic and not at all about YouTube comments. Now, YouTube cracks down pretty hard on bots, but the bots do exist, and those bots try to drive up views and comments on the channels that they're running on. So from Sparty's point of view, he thinks that it's pretty easy to set up a chatbot that can perfectly mimic a human being because chatbots exist. And because of this, he's under the impression that the AXP channel developed bots that are sophisticated enough to pass the Turing test and maybe even the Voight-Kampff test. And they've set this bot to run on tens of accounts, some of which are decades old, all to, I guess, to harass him. So, of course, he doesn't see how ridiculous that sounds. But the most ironic thing here is that his behavior in the comments is the most bot-like of anyone. In fact, he doesn't behave like a sophisticated bot. He behaves like the cheapest, simplest script that anyone can write up that looks at certain trigger words and posts the same scripted response over and over. But he thinks that the AXP is somehow out to get him with all these bots. His sense of persecution comes from having tried one time to call in, but he failed to get on the air. Now, this might be because he called too late, since it's very unlikely that a theist wouldn't be able to get on. Or it might be because the call screener panicked after hearing the kind of deranged things that he probably spewed to that poor call screener. And we know how toxic he can be. He is very anti-gay and particularly anti-trans. Here are some of the anti-LGBTQ posts that he spams. This is just a small sample. He seems very obsessed with gays and trans people, and he keeps on talking about gay theists or gay theists. He thinks that the comments are where he might meet some gay theists. I don't know. So that's the background of the most bot-like bigoted troll on the channel. But the reason for this video is to talk about the comments he makes about the speed of light squared being 5. So let's take a look at a scripted post here. This is always the same script that he copy-pastes, like the bot that he is. Whenever we mention how it's completely nonsensical that speed of light squared is 5, he will just post this. And his excuse is that we are not understanding what an example is. So let's see if he's right about that. Now, to begin with, he is trying to say that you can't multiply 2 oranges with 2 pears to get 4 apples. I have no idea why he thinks anyone would, but maybe he just doesn't like fruit. And then he asks how you can multiply density times miles per hour to equal joules. This is where he betrays how he's not an engineer. In fact, he may not even have graduated high school. Density is not a unit of measurement, but he thinks it's a measure of mass. Kilogram is a measure of mass. And he talks about miles per hour, which is not even a metric unit of measure for speed. The only SI standard unit he gets here correctly is joules. But then he just throws in a comment about Einstein's energy mass equivalency not making sense to him. Another evidence that he's not an engineer. And he thinks that he's somehow smarter than Einstein because he thinks that if energy and mass is indeed equivalent, the equation will be E equals m. Now, we all know Einstein is smarter than him. In fact, I would say most junior high schoolers would be smarter than him. Because Einstein doesn't say energy equals mass. Because energy and mass do not have the same units. There has to be some constant, a multiplicative constant. In this case, it's the speed of light squared. He thinks that Einstein's equation doesn't work because he thinks some magic secret unit of measure has to tie the equation together. In fact, it just requires SI standard units. Now, he could easily have looked this up. With a simple Google search, you can go directly to the wiki page for the joules, which tells you that the SI base units for joules is kilogram times meter squared per second squared. And this is exactly the unit you would get from mc squared. M is the mass in kilograms, and the speed of light is in meters per second. And once it's squared, you get meters squared per second squared. This is actually a very simple concept, something that doesn't require you to be a mechanical engineer to understand. But if you were a mechanical engineer, you would definitely know this. And he makes some strange, nonsensical comment about the speed of light in a vacuum. He says, how a constant in an equation is because the speed of light is constantly the speed of light in a vacuum. Now, if you understand what he's saying here, please post in the comments. Now, then he makes a couple of comments after that just to demonstrate how smart he thinks he is. He's not. And now we get to this example. He gives as an example energy of 15, mass of 3, and light speed squared as the infamous 5. First of all, if he was ever any type of engineer, maybe even if he was the engineer for Thomas the Tank Engine, he would know that you need units to make these examples make sense. For the mass is the mass that he gave in grams or nanograms or pounds, or maybe even his fake unit of density. And the light speed squared is a constant, and the constant can't be just 5. And it also has to have units of meters squared per second squared, because otherwise none of the units make sense. So his example here is not an example of Einstein's E equals mc squared equation. These are just math examples. Simple ones. And these equations that he asks makes no sense because there are no units. And that's the reason why he wastes everyone's time and space with the spam. And obviously, everyone is his engineering daddy because he's definitely no engineer. And then for the rest of his comments here, he says he's still waiting on this unit of measure that ties Einstein's energy mass equivalency equation together. And that unit of measure is joules. He's been told this over and over, but he simply can't understand that. And so he keeps on asking the question, the answered question, over and over. He says this is third grade level of math. Yeah, the math itself is third grade, but if you were an engineer, you would know that you would have to provide the units of measure. So when he asks what value for energy, what value for mass, what value for the speed of light squared, it's nonsensical because you need to have the value and the unit. And without having the units, the values don't make sense and you can't solve anything. And then he gets into this pseudoscience of 9 code and this vortex math. And I'm not going to get into that. If he's interested in telling us all about it, he can post his own video or stop posting spam and post something actually new. And finally, at the end, he talks about the speed of light, and he actually gets it right, although he gives you 2 imperial measurements of speed of light in the miles per second and feet per second, which you can't use in Einstein's equation. But the funny thing is, and again another example of how he's not an engineer, he gives 300,000 kilometers per second, and that has basically one significant digit. But then for the meters per second, he gives 299,792,458 meters per second. So he gives you 9 significant digits. And again, if you were an engineer, you would realize that that's not the right way of doing that. And he ends here with answer them correctly or shut up. Because the problem is that he did not ask the question correctly. So he probably should shut up. So that's it for this video. I would appreciate if everyone could like, and if you want, subscribe, because it's interesting. But if you look at Rick Lambert, his account, he has 22 subscribers. So that's actually more than what I have. So I would really appreciate everyone if you could subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you at the next video.